Okay, hello Seven Red. Welcome to our first Explain Everything presentation on ancient Egypt. In today's presentation, we will look at a broad outline of the history of ancient Egypt. As you can see on this map, the ancient Egyptian civilization developed in the Nile Valley. It is one of several of the first civilizations. So that means that Egypt was one of the world's earliest societies that was based around farming to develop cities and complicated forms of leadership that went beyond tribal-based systems. About 5,000 years before the birth of Christ, the first people to settle in ancient Egypt did so along the Nile River. As you can imagine, the land along the Nile River was quite fertile and good for growing food. So farming began in that part of the world. At first, the people who settled there, who had formerly been hunter-gatherers and nomads, meaning that they moved around looking for food, at first they formed themselves into small tribes and chiefdoms, that is, small communities under the authority of chiefs. Over time they developed a unique culture and would slowly come together to form a single society, as we will see in the next slide. As you can see in this map, there is a distinction between Upper and Lower Egypt. It can be quite confusing because Upper Egypt is in the south and Lower Egypt is in the north. Those two societies were initially separate, but were brought together, according to legend, under King Menes, whose picture you can see on the page. After many centuries of solidifying the kingdom, we come to what historians refer to as the Old Kingdom. This is when ancient Egypt first reached a level of great prosperity and power in the ancient world. The map that you can see and the area coloured in pink is the area that was under Old Kingdom Egypt. It lasted for about 400 years. This part of history is most famous for the building of the pyramids of Giza. Their picture is on this page, as you can see. During this time, the ancient Egyptians developed a complicated religious belief about the afterlife. Pyramids were built for the kings of Egypt, so that while they were asleep, as they were said to be when they died, they would have many belongings that they'd had in their life that befitted their status as members of the royal family, so that they could continue to have a high status in the afterlife. Most common people, of course, were not able to afford such monuments to themselves, so they had to make do with much cheaper arrangements, and according to the theology of the ancient Egyptians, were not able to enjoy their afterlife to the same extent as those who were in the royal family. We now move to the first intermediate period. For reasons that historians still debate, the kings of the Old Kingdom lost a great deal of authority to local rulers, and there was a separation in much of Egypt from the royal authority, so that local leaders and rulers gained most of the power and control. According to the ancient Egyptians, this was a time of great war, division and famine and suffering for the people of ancient Egypt. It lasted, as you can see, for just under 100 years. What historians know as the Middle Kingdom begins when a family of governors from Thebes, a city in Egypt which you can see on the map here, took control of both Upper and Lower Egypt and restored unity and stability to the country. It lasted for 400 years, according to historians at least, and is a period best known for great works of literature. It is also very well known for the woman whose picture you can see on the page. Her name is Hatshepsut, and she was one of the very few female pharaohs. She dressed as a man to give herself authority, and she is very well known in the modern world. This is also a time when the kings of Egypt first start referring to themselves by that term, Pharaoh. So I'll be using that in future when I refer to the rulers of ancient Egypt. The Middle Kingdom declined in similar circumstances to the Old Kingdom. There was a great deal of division and disunity. However, there are many foreigners who had come to live in Egypt, and that contributed to the problems of the Middle Kingdom. The second intermediate period lasted for just under 100 years, and it is known as the time when a foreign people who had come from the north, from what is now the Middle East, they were known as the Hyksos. They ruled Egypt in the north. As you can see from the costumes in this image, they were quite distinct from the traditional Egyptian people. Eventually, a person known as Ahmose from Thebes defeated the Hyksos, and they had to leave Egypt, and again a native Egyptian ruler was restored, and the unity of the kingdom was restored into what is known by historians as the New Kingdom. In the New Kingdom, ancient Egypt reaches the height of its power. All the pink parts of the map you can see on this page form a part of the Egyptian Empire. Ramesses II is probably the best known ruler of ancient Egypt in the New Kingdom. The territory which was controlled by ancient Egypt during the New Kingdom was the greatest amount of territory that it would ever control. As you can see, it goes right down into Africa and Nubia. Nubia constitutes what is now part of Sudan and also parts of Ethiopia. It also controls areas near where it says Gaza on the map, which were a part of ancient Egypt and ancient Israel, and are actually a part of modern Israel as well. As had happened at other times in ancient Egyptian history, the New Kingdom went into a period of decline. This decline was caused by the changing demographics of North Africa and the Middle East, with the movements of several new people who attacked the old societies. In the end, for almost 1,000 years, ancient Egypt was ruled by foreign dynasties. The most well-known was a dynasty that were descendants of Alexander the Great, the famous Greek. This dynasty was the last dynasty of ancient Egypt after the death of Cleopatra, who was the last pharaoh of that dynasty. Egypt became a province of the Roman Empire, and that brought to the end the unique civilization of ancient Egypt. So there are some common themes from the history of ancient Egypt that we've just had an overview of. Long periods of stability, prosperity, and unity under a strong ruler were often followed by periods of disunity, of famine, and war. One of the ways historians are able to distinguish between the periods are the monuments built by the rulers to glorify themselves. During the times of unity, such as the Old, Middle, and New Kingdoms, the rulers of ancient Egypt were able to build great monuments, like the pyramids at Giza in the Old Kingdom. These monuments testify the wealth and the power of those leaders in being able to bring massive numbers of people to work to build those monuments. During times of disunity, the rulers did not have those same resources, and the monuments and tombs that they built for themselves reflect this. They are much less grand, and many have simply not survived the passage of time. You will notice in the timeline on this slide that the dates are slightly different to those on the other slides in this presentation. That is because different historians disagree on the exact years in which various events occurred in ancient Egypt. Considering how long ago these things occurred, that's not surprising. So if you see different timelines on the internet or in books that give slightly different dates, don't worry about that. It's just different historians putting forward different views, but generally the dates are all fairly the same, with only very minor differences. It will not affect your study of this unit. Now on Edmodo, there is a very short quiz. It's very simple. There are 2 activities that you need to complete. You simply need to fill in some words on blank spaces in sentences. It's a very simple activity just for you to try and remember what we've covered in this very short presentation. Thank you for listening.